Hello, beloved. This is now week 5 of our study, our Lenten study together, traveling the prayer paths of Jesus. And this week, we come to the Garden of Gethsemane. We all remember the story that Jesus gathers in the upper room with his disciples, and then afterwards, in that overnight period, he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. It's a remarkable insight into the journey of Jesus, into his mind, his heart, his struggle, his preparation for the crucifixion, and his relationship with the disciples. I've actually been to the Garden of Gethsemane just on the outskirts of the old city of Jerusalem. And what's remarkable about it is that there are olive trees there. Gethsemane basically means olive press. It's a grove of olive trees, and some of those trees are so old and have been nurtured for these hundreds of years, and they were present, they were there when Jesus went to that quiet place to pray. If you remember, the disciples were heavy with sleep, and he says, wait here while I go there and pray. But stay awake, watch and wait and pray with me, but they were heavy with sleep. And Jesus struggles with fulfilling the will of God. He says, if this cup can pass from me, I would prefer that, but if not my will, but your will be done. So we all are familiar with that, but we need to look at how all of that conversation with God is really happening in prayer. So prayer can be this depth of pouring out our heart and soul to God, and even struggling with the choices, the paths, the unfolding drama of our lives, and even the challenge of adversity and suffering. So Jesus had awareness of what was coming, and he was struggling. Even Jesus was struggling. So he shared his heart with God the Father in prayer. So that's something we learn by following the prayer paths of Jesus in Gethsemane, is that the God who knows us fully will share in our struggle, in our adversity. In the chapter this week, the writer talks about life can either be a maze or a labyrinth. So what's the difference? If you've ever been in a maze, it's a series of paths where you have to make choices. It's endless choices, and you're not clear. You can't see clearly where you're going. And so some of those choices can lead you to dead ends. That's a maze. By contrast to that is a labyrinth. I don't know if you've ever walked a labyrinth, but a labyrinth is a circle, and so you're being led on a path toward a centering point. So as you walk the paths and make your way around the circle and inward, you're going to a central place, a centering place. So you're moving from an outward journey to an inward point of center. And then once you're centered, you move from that center outward, back out into your life and your world. That's a labyrinth. So in the early church, labyrinths were built to teach a method of prayer where your steps would lead you to a centering point. And I think that's what we see in the prayer paths of Jesus. And even when we face adversity, even Jesus had to be centered. So that's what's going on in the Garden of Gethsemane. He is praying before his defining moment of being crucified on the cross on our behalf, as an atoning sacrifice. Christ goes, even in his agony, his passion, he goes to get and to be centered in even his identity as being the beloved Son of God. It is that grace of being beloved that gives him the strength to face the agony to come, the adversity, the suffering. So in the prayer paths of Jesus, what we find is that Jesus travels to his centering point in prayer time and time again. The disciples are weary with sleep, and that's understandable. Sometimes we get weary too. But what we learn in the prayer path of Jesus is that we're moving to our centering place in the grace of God. So I hope you're learning that, and we're learning to practice that. Life can be a maze sometimes, and we end up making lots of choices that lead to dead ends. That's the nature of life. But maybe we can choose to travel a labyrinth, moving in our path in a more defined way toward a centering place. And so that movement from outside to an inner centered place will then lead us back out into the world and our life centered in God. That's a great image and experience of prayer. That's how Jesus prayed. That's how he discerned the will of God and surrendered himself to it. So may that be so for us as we travel the prayer paths of Jesus to that centering place of grace.